Hi, my name is Hendricks, and I am an architect. I'm a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, and my paper today for the DEFSA 2021 conference is called Developing an Educational Strategy for Emerging Technology in Design. It's a case study based on the fabrication lab and the faculty. Now, emerging technology has been developing at an exponential rate, and it has direct implication on our design education. This boom in innovation has been dubbed, as we know, as the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and has been framed by the 2015 World Economic Forum by Klaus Schwab, and then echoed by our South African politicians in 2016 as a means to catalyze a struggling economy through the government and educational policies. Now, academic scholars have been very critical about this hollow narrative against the face of high unemployment, poor education, and developing foundation skills in South Africa. Educators are confronted with very little scaffolding to address technological development and leaving design educators with lots of skepticism. Emerging technology can often fall into this realm of being a hype or unrealistic expectation and forcing design educators to limit their teaching methods to the classroom. In the meantime, fabrication laboratories are globally growing sites of innovation and are hands-on creative spaces of production, art, and science and engineering, and offers the exposure to solving real-life problems. In addition, they are being implemented in education institutions and communities, from kindergarten all the way up to tertiary institutions. And is used to drive pedagogies of the future by teaching 21st century content skills in emerging technology. Emerging technology often offers a wide range of opportunities to enhance education and prepare students and industries for the future, which forms part of this industrial revolution that we know. How do we develop a relevant change for designing curriculums and do not get caught up in this hype of it all? How do we foster applicable transformation of skills and content for our learners? And how do we make sustainable transitions towards transformative pedagogies? I established a fabrication lab at the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture a few years ago, and I've started to document some of that work and the change that it has in education. So this paper argues that the fabrication laboratories can pose as a contemporary learning space in addition to the existing current design sites to aid in integration of technology in the design curriculums. It considers that the FabLab is a fourth dimension of learning and design education and caters for developing ideas, testing, making, and even failing as a crucial part of a much needed pragmatic approach to design thinking. This paper is very concerned around technology, but specifically in African tertiary design education. It is concerned with how we approach design thinking in emerging technology in Africa in a globalized context. Technology, as we always had, technology has always had a profound effect on education in general. And in the last couple of decades, we've seen the effect of it. We've seen OV projectors, computers. At school, we've used calculators. So it's nothing new. And emerging technology has for a long time interested some educators like Emil and Reeves in 2008. Information and communication technology, ICT, has been a foundational mode of education for decades prior to those using technological tools and support, enhancing and optimizing educational networks. The introduction to the internet in education has provided wide access to students, and that has been normalized. And Tarling and Ngambi in 2016 recognized that emerging technology may be used to achieve deep and meaningful learning experiences. So academic scholars agree that technology enhances education, and Emil and Thomas in 2008 draws from this understanding of technology, invention, development, and cognitive development and deployment of tools and other artifacts that has a strong link to philosophical approach to education of pragmatism. With the transformation of education to consider emerging technologies, Tarling and Ngambi in 2016 states that the educational spaces will transform in ways that will completely be unfamiliar to how the current educators understand them, and that education is not limited to the educator, to those books and its curriculum. Just to come back to that South African policy, that much of the emerging technology resistance could stem from the way that 4IR is being framed, and that the trickling down in the rhetoric into our institutions. Klaus Schwab's speech in 2015 inspires global politicians and has positive effects on 4IR and the economy. And this mantra has been also echoed down to South African, the President and the African Union in 2016. And the uptake of digital technologies will lead to the improved competitiveness and provide fresh opportunities for inclusive growth for countries. But FADA, which was then subsequently embedded in education policies, education in South Africa is in the crisis, says Tarling and Ngambi, and goes on to state that there are still deep inequalities experienced by learners across South Africa. FADA in 2012 is very firm on his belief that the state is not dealing with deep issues of education and views 4IR narrative as to provide false hope, calling it techno-imaginary, to fix education. And emerging technology, let alone education, has no clear roadmap. What does this mean for South African education? Academics are being very wary about embracing 4IR and its true transformation if the state provides very little clarity and a clear pathway to a digital economy in where just less than half South African population is unemployed. Emerging technology educators it forces educators to reconceptualize our modalities of knowledge. There are other aspects of education that we need to consider, like developing new ways of approaching emerging technology. It will require a design approach. It will require a design-based approach, and educators will need to consider a sustainable change. Tarling and Ngambi in 2016 focuses on scalable, innovative practice of teaching with emerging technologies for wider education impact. And the research lab draws attention to the need for teaching change frameworks that plots out how teachers can actually change sustainably towards implementing technology. Now, the role of technology has been limited to tools and equipment. Emile and Thomas in 2008 argued that it has contributed to the misunderstanding of the role of technology in education and that there's an important value being lost. They state that educators need to take up new practices of understanding of emerging technology, and that what he describes as being design-based research in technology. Dose in 2015 states that we need to recognize epistemological benefits and that the approach requires a philosophical intertwining of technology in our teaching approach. In the simplest terms, in the education context, a FabLab is an education where education meets innovation to produce a bottom-up and non-linear education environment. A fourth and crucial educational physical space that complements the existing spaces of instruction. It's a space that provides learners with new tools and techniques with a strong culture of sharing. Open source is a culture which is also sharing by digital users who are opposed to commercial capitalistic approaches to knowledge. It also provides access to space, tools, expertise that learns to learn new skills, techniques, and to design inter and cross-disciplinary, and to quickly prototype ideas through digital and iterative processes. It plays a valuable gap in society, sometimes where governments cannot fill. And it's a space which cultivates technical knowledge amongst people of all ages. One of the main reasons that fab labs are becoming more popular is because of its domestication of machines, its tools and equipment. And this was quoted by Hilscher in 2017. And he also states that it is no different to any other technologies that we have, because domestication of televisions or computers, the localization of 3D printers, laser cutters, CNCs, milling machines has placed the power of design and making in the hands of the users, and do not necessarily you don't necessarily need to be qualified to operate and work in these domains, provided health and safety. Fabrication spaces can also be related to other terms like maker spaces, thinker spaces, DIY, open source, and innovation hubs. And just a little bit of history, that Neil Gershenfeld, father of the MIT lab, was one of the first people in 2001 to establish this type of cultural workspace at MIT in the States. And Venter and van der Walt in South Africa also state that design education has been disparaged largely for not aligning with emerging technology. And to prove that point, for example, on the international scene, here we see, and some of us know these artists, Iris van Herpen and a paper artist, Peter Gettenaar, working in industry and developing new ways of art and design. This is an example of a very inspirational space that is another lab. This is specifically an architecture lab in Barcelona, one of the oldest labs. And here you can see education being inverted, the bureaucracy and the hierarchy flattened in order to make a space where education in technology can indeed be accessed. This is where we started our workshop a few years ago. And there are different types of workshops. You have workshops for production, and then you have innovator space. So we started out with a space that was very dry and looked like a workshop, a space of production. But over time, I managed to get more access to more funding in order to create a space that is a lot more innovative for students. Today, we have a 2 million rand innovation space, a fabrication lab that hosts most of the fabrication tools. It's different from a workshop in the sense that it actually fosters and cultivates new knowledge and new ideas and sharing of new ideas. This is a organogram of the fabrication lab and how it's not just a workshop in that sense, that it has got folding new aspects and criteria which can make this space a place of multi-dimensions. Things from software to hardware, learning, talks, visiting professors, young maker programs where young people come in and learn. They are very skills-driven programs, and they are more theory and educational aspects which can be taught in these spaces. Pragmatic methods in activity-based learning. What this means essentially is that students learn as they go along, and their understanding of the world is built on their experience when they are in control of their education. Learning through personal experience, essentially. In this image, there are 3 lecturers. You would not be able to know and identify who are those lecturers simply because of the way that we flattened the master-student hierarchy. Spaces can be converted into instructional spaces. And here in this diagram or this image, there are 2 students who are from different departments working on similar projects that they are interested in. This is a mycelium project, which works on materials, that works in art and architecture. Sorry, that's my timer. So to wrap up, what this essentially does is silo and de-siloing architectural or faculty design departments, where not only in design but also in the sciences field and engineering, where different faculties and departments can start to interlink and form new structures and new relationships inside of the composition of the departments. Also, they can FabLabs can also become spaces of online instruction. So even though it's a physical space, it can also be help to educate students about what design thinking is inside of technology. There are also projects where can cut across different disciplines in design that looks at materials, structures, forms, shape, culture, theory, decolonization of education. So to wrap up, FabLabs have distinctive benefits. Supports interdisciplinary learning. It also is a space of democracy where people can get access to education and education which works for them. It disrupts the conventions of learning methods and increases the learners' motivations. So when students walk in, they are very interested and engaged in the type of learning because it is not curated. Creating new types of communities. So there are communities like young maker spaces or young makers. So these are young students who are interested in learning about different softwares and hardwares in different ways and materials. And we cut across different departments in that sense. Increasing people's skills, ability to learn new software and new tools. Teaching about new design, other design ontologies. So understanding what other concepts are that exist in other education, design education fields. Developing an empathy for other departments, other understanding of knowledge, materials, and an entrepreneurial role where students can go on to develop and choose to become entrepreneurs in these spaces. To stimulate the economy, which was quoted by some academics in papers, where maker spaces can actually begin to play a strong role in society. So to conclude, the 4R is just a primer really for thinking about emerging technology, and it's at high level strategic. And although it speaks to a positive impact of our economies, it is not seen as a mechanism. It is not to be seen as a mechanism to displace poor education in South Africa. It is undeniable that global economies are in neoliberal context, and that the intention of countries by nature is to compete economically. The context in 4R is being presented, does very little for design educators. In fact, it is very discouraging. We should consider emerging technology for its relevance and for its practical intentions. Technology has always been at our disposal, some more convincing, some more convinced than others, and it's up to the design educators to make sense of all of its applications. The benefits and the beneficiaries are our students, our design educators, and our departments and our faculties. And we would be developing new knowledge which would advance our societies. So in this paper, I argue that emerging technology will not be able to solve the problems of education inequality, but by developing new modalities of teaching and research in emerging technology, we will be able to solve some practical and tangible problems which face our country. Although institutions are competing globally in ratings and apply pressure to increasing research quality, especially for art, this should not be the reason for design educators to become despondent. Accreditation bodies should begin to endorse the core design skills and knowledge and competency, and would have to reconsider qualification outputs with specific focus on technology-related modules in the curriculum. If design schools want to aspire to offer the best quality in education, they would need to invest in emerging technology resources and develop a new culture which engages with the way our students will design in the future. Creating innovative curriculums and programs to reflect 21st century skills would need to be on the top of the agenda.